When mayors, governors, or members of Congress come under investigation, it always causes a wide public outcry. And when former vice presidential candidates from one of the parties, well, in this case from the United States Democratic Party, come under investigation, it should spark an explosion of interest. But the left-wing press is silent as a grave. They don't even try. They wouldn't say a word of truth even under torture. No matter how much you torture them, you won't get any truth. 23-year-old blogger Nick Shirley has just ended the career of one of the most powerful Democrats in America. Tim Walz is leaving politics. I hope first he'll be forgotten and then go to prison, and again, I hope for a long time.
Amid national criticism over a fraud scandal in his state, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz is expected to exit the 2026 gubernatorial race. Political analyst Bolas Olson wrote in DNAT on Sunday evening that he will drop out of the 2026 Minnesota governor race. This news was announced before a press conference by Walz's office set for 11 a.m. Monday. His office did not comment on what the failed vice presidential candidate would announce. According to local media, the Post reached out to Walz's office for comment. And he came under close scrutiny from the entire country, including President Trump, because of alleged Medicaid and daycare fraud in Minnesota that resulted in multi-billion-dollar losses. The scrutiny intensified after independent journalist Nick Shirley released a viral video exposing the completely fraudulent nature of taxpayer-funded daycares. Federal authorities began operations in the Land O'Lakes region to detect, prevent, and eliminate crimes. These criminals are deceiving Americans. According to the Department of Homeland Security, Immigration and Customs Enforcement is on site, the FBI is on site, the Department of Labor, the Small Business Administration, the Small Business Association, and many other organizations, the Department of Justice, and of course the Department of Homeland Security. This is something that you could say literally blew up the entire internet. This was the single most viral tweet of the entire year 2025 on the platform. The exposure of Nick Shirley, here it is.
This is what public opinion means. Public outrage. About 300 million people watched Nick's video about our money being siphoned off by migrant gangs who were either helped or, at the very least, not stopped. Here we still need to figure out their role. Numerous Democrats from the Minnesota state government and other states. 300 million viewers is practically all adult Americans plus foreigners. The question now is, what evidence does the FBI have that Walz knew what was going on right under his nose? And as witnesses are already saying, not only did he not stop the theft, but he also actively persecuted those who reported anything to the press or, say, the tax police. And the second question is, what exactly did he and all the others get out of it? Every day we learn more and more about the filth that the Democratic Party of the United States of America has brought into our lives. And the Democrats naturally are trying to defend themselves and at least somehow fix the impression from their, about them like a criminal organization party, an organized crime group. But you see, misfortunes are falling on them every second. For example, right now, they caught someone and brought him to the United States. So, Nicolas Maduro, what you may ask, does the Democratic Party of America have to do with Maduro? Their outrage, which suddenly started pouring out from there, makes you remember that voting in the United States was done using software, not machines or hardware, made in Venezuela. And many Venezuelans also came to the United States, let's say, in 2020, as if to observe the process, and they had full access to all stages of voting and counting. Wonderful, yes. Venezuela was bringing drugs to the United States. About 10% of everything sold in the United States came to us by boats and planes, meaning from Venezuela. But why are the Democrats in such a panic? Well, they arrested Maduro. Okay, they shouted something again. Trump is bad. Of course, Trump is bad. Whatever he does is terrible. Yes, but they are just in a panic.
The former head of Venezuela's national intelligence reportedly has started revealing the names of those involved, and dozens of corrupt Democrats are at the very top of that list.
Maduro's closest aides are cracking and trying to earn themselves some points for acquittal or, let's say, a shorter sentence. And they say a bunch of elected Democrats took from us, well, you know what they usually take. Yeah, cash. The question is, for what purpose? So they could traffic drugs and kill more young Americans?
We are receiving reports that captured Venezuelan official Hugo Carvajal, the former head of Venezuela's national intelligence, is openly accusing a number of American officials of receiving millions of dollars in kickbacks from the Maduro regime. By the way, in case you didn't know, Carvajal pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit narco-terrorism in June last year and is now serving time in a United States federal prison. Just a few weeks ago in December, while in custody, Carvajal wrote a letter to President Trump in which he accused United States government officials and CIA employees of receiving payments from the Maduro regime to help him stay in power. Well, to be fair, at the moment, there are two conflicting reports, one of which claims that Carvajal did not name any specific political partner or government official. However, there is now a report circulating with a list of names, especially Democratic senators who allegedly received kickbacks from the Maduro government. I repeat, this has not yet been confirmed at the time of making this video, but the alleged list includes all the major Democratic politicians, along with a few Republicans as well. But what is extremely important to understand here is that these accusations are just the tip of the iceberg, and the corruption of the Venezuelan regime, which was thoroughly permeated by international corruption. In fact, it can be argued that corruption was the connective tissue of the Venezuelan regime. It has negatively impacted governments and elections worldwide for over 20 years.
So we can't say yet whether there is any list or if it's all, as they say, fake. What is clear is that the former head of Venezuelan intelligence, who is now in a United States prison, decided he needed to confess and wrote a letter to Trump. It has been confirmed that he really did write, and Trump's office received the letter stating that there are politicians and officials in the United States who receive money from Venezuela. Moreover, for now, it seems that this case is not related to drugs, but to voting and elections.
The regime of Chavez, which revived after 1998 following an unsuccessful military coup, wants international organization of a national government. So the organizational center was the Cartel de los Soles, which was a Venezuelan criminal organization with a surprisingly high ranking. The appointed generals are identified by sun insignias and uniform distinctions which inspire their organization's name. But essentially, they acted as organized crime bosses, controlling the state oil reserves and electoral systems, while at the same time embezzling trillions of dollars. Among the key figures was an operative connected to Hezbollah who brought Iranian influence into the Venezuelan government. There was also another man named Diosdado Cabello. He is the Minister of Internal Affairs, currently heads the parliament, and was a close ally of Castro during his lifetime. Jorge Rodriguez is the main organizer of this scheme, and his sister is now vice president. And together, these operatives coordinate an extensive international corruption network based on strategic partnerships with China, Iran, Russia, and even terrorist organizations, turning Venezuela into what some call a rogue state, which in essence served as the headquarters of the De los Soles cartel, a drug trafficking operation run by Venezuelan military generals.
A good country that drug lords have offered as a haven to all terrorists, including those from Iran and Russia.
Specifically, it was China that provided Venezuela with more than $100 billion in financial resources, which accounts for over 40% of China's total lending in Latin America. So these loans were structured as oil-backed deals, obligating Petróleos de Venezuela, Sociedad Anónima, that is, the Venezuelan state oil company, to supply crude oil to the China National Petroleum Corporation. However, here's the irony. Rampant corruption and inefficient management in Venezuela led to nearly 60 China-financed projects being left unfinished or completely abandoned. Investigators found that contractors connected to the Venezuelan government were receiving bribes amounting to 10 to 15% of the project costs. They laundered hundreds of millions of dollars through shell companies and accounts in Andorra. Despite all this, despite Venezuela defaulting on debts estimated at $19 billion and stopping payments on loans. Despite all this, China nevertheless elevated the relationship to what they called an all-weather strategic partnership, signing an agreement on 600 cooperation projects in 2023. China now buys between 55 and 80% of Venezuelan oil, often at reduced prices to pay off debts, buying Venezuelan oil at reduced prices for repayment.
An interesting alliance. We give you oil at reduced prices, and you give us equipment for population control. China is a world leader in this field, as they say. Well, here you go. Give it a try. 1.5 billion people kept on a short leash. I don't know exactly what it's called.
An interesting alliance, lower prices and you get population control equipment. An interesting alliance, oil. Lower prices and you get equipment for population control.
We're learning a lot now, not even from Maduro himself, but from people who, like in Iran, the rebels suddenly felt that someone would help them. Now information will start pouring in.
An interesting alliance. Oil at a reduced price, equipment for population control, traps from non-Western countries, as well as billionaire-funded NGOs and supposedly charitable organizations. An interesting alliance, oil at reduced prices, and you get equipment for population control. Interesting. Oil at reduced prices and you get equipment for control. This is not Venezuelan sovereignty at all. It's nothing but managed poverty. It's real geopolitical exploitation. And that's the distinction that traditional media will never make, because the restoration of sovereignty only looks aggressive to those who benefited from its absence.
Let's take a closer look. What if a bunch of random bandits took over a country and declared themselves the government? Should we as outside forces intervene? Well, no, we shouldn't. But if outside forces want to, they will intervene. Is it good or bad? Is it moral or not? Is it fair or not? Well, is this country now doing something that, in some way, let's say, affects the interests or interferes with its neighbors? Do the neighbors then have the right to intervene in this case? And who gives or denies this right? If you're strong, you can intervene and no one will stop you. Again, I'm not talking about morality, but about the reality of life. Have you ever seen anything actually happen based on morality, anywhere or any time? All countries that didn't want weaker neighbors to influence their affairs attacked those neighbors and forced them to change their behavior. Unless small countries had some kind of secret weapon or even more powerful patrons to protect them, the small country would change its behavior or be taken over. Well, crushed, I don't know, maybe broken up, plundered, with lots of casualties. And by the way, the reparations they paid to the victors, like for example, the Slavs paid tribute to the Mongols for What, 300 years? No, why? After losing several battles in the war, they decided it was better to live than keep fighting. They paid, and the Mongols didn't care if they lived. All that mattered was payment. Again, I'm not judging anyone's actions, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just stating the reality that we live in today, yesterday, and it seems tomorrow as well. The Union of Soviet Socialist Republics was possibly weaker there than Germany plus Italy plus Romania plus Hungary plus Austria. But with the support of the United States and Canada, it did not allow its territory to be captured. Now back to Venezuela, which was taken over by international cartels, that is, Islamist fascists and the Union of Fascist Communists from China and Russia. Well, now when we talk about intervention there, the concept of regime change doesn't really apply, but rather returning power to the citizens of Venezuela who once democratically chose socialism. But as with all socialists, they didn't want to give up power. And as a result, they turned a wonderful country into a camp for the population. And they worked with the Chinese to, well, let's say turn it into a digital camp as well. Just look at the Venezuelans, really. They are suffering a lot because Maduro is held captive in the United States.
This is restitution. This is the restoration of national sovereignty. So what happened in Venezuela is not imperialism. It's Trump interrupting the work of the globalist imperial machine that turns political banditry into seizure. So no, this is not America expanding. It's about returning what was stolen. It's about restoring sovereignty by exposing how the wealth was taken out, who bought what, and through which intermediaries. This is an attack on a corrupt power network that seems to reach all the way to Washington and only survives when nations remain weak enough to be covertly controlled.
Why do left-wing Democrats, liberals, globalists, progressives, they themselves always call themselves progressives, like how Lenin named his own criminal group the Bolsheviks? Why do they always lead countries into concentration camps, oppression, hunger, and suffering? Why don't they learn from the lessons of the past? Why can't they put two and two together? Maybe they're all just plain stupid, I mean, in terms of science or engineering, or in terms of being able to extrapolate from the particular to the general and vice versa, seeing a pattern and understanding how it will work in their specific case. But they're stupid, what can you do? That's why they shout from the podium, everything should be public, nothing private is better, even though they know that this very idea destroyed at least 36 countries in the 20th century alone. The ecstatic, crazed crowd roars and sobbing rips off their pink underwear. Listen to this man, not an idiot, but a liar and scoundrel.
Together, we'll end the cold alienation of harsh individualism and embrace the warmth of collectivism.
If someone doesn't believe their ears, here it is once again.
Together, we will put an end to the icy alienation of harsh individualism, replacing it with the heartfelt warmth of collectivism.
And here is one Marxist woman who doesn't know anything at all about what happened in the 20th century, not at all. She doesn't understand the principles of economics, human psychology, or crowd psychology at all. She knows nothing about anything. But she figured out, let's take from those who earned it and divide it among everyone. And then everyone will have everything right away and forever. Very good. She understood it exactly right.
I think that, in fact, for many centuries, we really viewed property as some kind of individual good, not as a collective one. And we are moving towards treating it as a common good and as a model of collective justice. It will require us to look at it differently. And this will mean that families, especially white families, but also some families of color who are also homeowners, will have a completely different relationship to property than what we have right now.
That is, white people, you built, you earned, you even saved up. But for us like me, well, I am actually white too, but my soul is black. I want it too. We really want what you earned, but we couldn't earn it, and our parents couldn't. And our grandfathers and grandmothers couldn't, because they were losers. That's why we really want it. So we go out onto the big road with Kistinium, stop your carriage, take everything you have, including the carriage itself, and then we ride in it ourselves. Yes, and if you don't resist, you'll come with us on the box seat. You'll be our fellow travelers, our social fellow travelers. We've already been through this, right? But if you resist, then it's either the camp or the next world, so where? If you're not a Muslim, of course you'll never get any virgins, not a single one. I think she needs a boyfriend and then she'll calm down, although who knows? Who knows? Maybe she needs 2 boyfriends. Going back to Venezuela, back when there were still decent people at cable news network, well, very few, but there were some. In 2006, Lou Dobbs did a sort of investigation about voting machines from Venezuela. It's interesting to listen and compare it to what cable news network has been pushing for more than 15 years after Lou Dobbs himself was fired for that broadcast. So, here's Lou Dobbs.
A Venezuelan company may be allowed to acquire one of the leading voting machine manufacturers in this country. Venezuela, of course, under the leadership of Hugo Chavez, is trying to change the views of most South American countries, shifting to the left. Critics of this deal argue that the very democracy of our country is up for sale and no one is doing anything about it.
Kitty Pilgrim reports that the use of about 19,000 electronic voting machines in the primaries in Chicago and Cook County on March 21 of this year is now under close scrutiny. Sequoia, the American maker of these machines, was acquired in 2005 by Smartmatic, a private firm mostly owned by Venezuelan businessmen. When major issues occurred with these machines in Chicago, about a dozen Venezuelan employees came to assist with the election. Chicago officials are extremely upset about this. Chicago officials are upset about this.
I believe
that American elections should be conducted by American companies and citizens, not by Venezuelan citizens.
Smartmatic is technically based in Boca Raton, Florida, but the company's president, Jack Blaine, testified to the Chicago City Council that fewer than a dozen Smartmatic employees work in Florida, and most of the staff are based in Venezuela. Watchdog groups are questioning why United States voting machines would be under the control of citizens of another country, especially a country whose own electoral process is highly suspicious.
We are convinced that this is a serious national security issue. It is unacceptable for companies owned by non-American corporations to have any access to our elections.
The Treasury Department should oversee the sale of American companies to foreign investors when national security is at stake, as in the Dubai Ports deal. This is known as the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States review process, and Congress is demanding an investigation.
In the case of Smartmatic, there are a number of questions that remain unanswered. That's why I wrote to the Secretary of the Treasury and asked them to review the ownership. It's offshore, murky, and no one seems to know who owns it. Our government definitely should know this.
It's a potential risk to the democratic process. So we called the Treasury Department to ask whether the sale of Sequoia in 2005 was reviewed or not. The Treasury Department said they are aware of the sale but can't confirm if it was reviewed. Some in Congress and voter oversight groups are demanding a better answer than that, Lou.
The Treasury Department is full of incompetence. Out of over 1,500 reviews, they blocked just one sale of American assets to foreign owners. But the company that makes voting machines, which is critically important for vote counting in this country. And they can't tell you whether the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States has reviewed it or not.
Subtitle editor, A. Semkin, proofreader, A. Yegorova.
They don't have an answer.
For us, Asia is the most arrogant, incompetent, bureaucratic idiot. That is, the Ministry of Finance is trying to get ahead of several other agencies in this category. We called. I realize Jon Snow is new and his term is short, but surely someone on his staff understands his responsibilities.
Must answer to the American people.
We contacted the authorities who said it was this company. Many people are now in a murky, unclear situation, and I believe thorough change is needed.
Yes, I think it truly needs major change.
Great, yes, that's definitely true, and of course we will continue to do that. I think we should give credit to Congresswoman Min. She has done an absolutely outstanding job working on this issue. And we take our hats off to her. At least someone is trying to bring clarity. This is Proofreader A.
Kulakova?
Call the White House. Let's get the answers so this audience knows what's going on by Monday evening. This is ridiculous.
We're actively looking into it. Lou?
Thank you, Kitty. This was already clear back in 2006, and at that time the president was George W. Bush, with his father, a former CIA director. There were no secrets between the White House and intelligence. Bush knew what those programs from Venezuela were, but he allowed their machines, their programs to be introduced to remove representatives in Congress from the state of Illinois and a bunch of other places and states. And for some reason, they elected Democrats everywhere. It's interesting that using the machines costs 4 times more than paper ballots. At every election, there are breakdowns and completely inexplicable spikes in these machines. Specialists always have to intervene, coming from Venezuela, fixing something there for our benefit, and it's always inevitable. The Democrats, including Biden, win, and Biden got 10 million more votes than Obama. You can compare Obama's popularity and Biden's popularity, the enthusiasm for Obama and the enthusiasm for Biden. And then these 10 million disappeared again and didn't vote or show up anywhere else. They just popped up once for Biden, voted, and then vanished into thin air, or maybe flew back to Venezuela. It's interesting that Bush Jr. won the presidency over Gore, but only because in the disputed state the governor was his own brother and the Supreme Court had a conservative majority. Why do we say that today is a turning point in history? Probably because the world was almost taken over by the communo-fascists. Under all sorts of interesting disguises, like the skin of a progressive, a liberal, a globalist, a Democrat, a socialist, and just a scoundrel, but these ones are like sheep. They disguise a scoundrel as a sheep, and only a miracle. That's Trump. That's his resilience, his luck. A bullet just 1 centimeter from death, and incredible determination broke through the grim nightmare of wackism mixed with Islamism. I'm afraid in its worst case, this is also a breakthrough in domestic politics. Endless trials will begin right when the congressional campaign for 26 is underway. That's this very year, which has already started. And in foreign policy, it weakens the anti-American bloc and helps our friends in Venezuela, in Saudi Arabia, in Iran, in Israel, everywhere. Not to mention the chance to end the war in Ukraine without handing over to Russia any additional territories that Russia hasn't already captured. This is an absolutely epical moment in the history of our civilization. I used to always hear that changes are, well, always for the worse, but now I'm convinced that some changes can be for the better and some can be for much better. Congratulations to everyone on the opportunity that has unexpectedly come our way. Until we meet again.